I do want to talk about Charlene's question that popped up because it's been a topic of conversation on social media, and I've seen some reporters run with it. Should we be concerned about the referee team who historically penalized the Bills more so than the Chiefs? I fully understand that question. Luca, I feel partly responsible for this becoming such a big talking point this week because I put out a tweet when they first announced who the referee was for this game, Shawn Hochuli, and I went to Pro Football Reference. It's all there, super easy. I was like, hey, just so you know, home teams are X, Y, and Z. And I thought when I framed the tweet, it looked good for the Bills because home teams generally do better. He's a little like when you look at referees on the whole, he tends to favor road teams a little more, but you still see home teams more penalized, home teams winning record, yada, yada, yada. And then like immediately underneath my tweet came all these people that are like, yeah, he's the guy from the Philly game. And then it started like sparking up, and then people were quote tweeting it, and then they started coming up with stats. And then like the next day it was there's a conspiracy theory against the Bills, which is not at all what I think Charlene's indicating. What I will tell you all, the stats that are concerning about Shawn Hochuli is one, where did it go? I had the stats up, Luca. The Chiefs under Shawn Hochuli, I believe, are 8-2 in games he's refereed in the Mahomes era.
Yes.
Which on the whole, that sounds kind of sus, as the kids say. But the Chiefs have been one of the best teams in the league. So you could really isolate any set of games, any segment of games, and be like, hey, the Chiefs have a winning record when they play on the West Coast. The Chiefs have a winning record when they play indoors. Like underneath Mahomes and Reed, they win. The other thing I will tell you, the one that people are hung up on that I want to make sure we mention, Luca, Shawn Hochuli has been the referee for 4 Sean McDermott games. The Bills were called for 10 plus penalties in 3 of 4 of those games, and the Bills went 1-3. When I tell you that sounds uncomfortable. The problem is 2 of those games were 2018, Josh Allen's rookie year. You don't need me and Luca to tell you, but if I wanted to, I could just hit mute on my mic and tell Luca, hey, Luca, why don't we talk about that 2018 offensive line for a second, where the Bills went out that next offseason and paid for Mitch Morse and drafted not Deion Dawkins. Deion Dawkins was a rookie that year. But anyway, the offensive line was atrocious that year. The Bills lost a game 47-3 in Baltimore. That was one of the games. Nathan Peterman started that game, by the way, where the Bills got 10 plus penalties. I don't think Shawn Hochuli was the reason the Bills lost. And I don't think he was playing favorites in that game. I think the Bills were a garbage football team that year. And it doesn't surprise me that 2 of those games were in that year. The third game where they got 10 plus penalties was the Eagles game this year. And look, that was just a game that had an incredible amount of offensive plays on both sides. The play count in that game, with the pace that both those offenses were moving, was off the charts. I remember after that game just being astounded by how many plays each team had. And the plays are going to give you more chance at penalties. Now, yes, did the Bills have way more penalties that game than the Eagles? Yes. If you want to be concerned about that, I understand it. To me, that's a 1-game sample size. I think refereeing as a whole, Luca, is down in the league. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I don't think Shawn Hochuli hates the Bills or loves the Chiefs. I think if he's reffed Chiefs games the last 4 years, they probably won because they've been good. If he reffed Bills games in 2018, they probably looked terrible because they were terrible. And that Bills-Eagles game just happened to be one of the many examples of games this year in the entire sport gone both ways for the Bills against the Bills, where refereeing was very, very sketchy.
First and foremost, you were not at cause. I mean, this was a national thing that you were seeing across the board everywhere and stuff like that. People were picking up opinions left and right. I'm just going to be short and sweet with this. And I saw Roy make a comment. I wasn't sure how long you were going to go, but Roy, shout out you. That's immediately where my head went. The thing that I hate the most about these official conversations, especially concerning the playoffs, this is not Hochuli's team. This is not the team that you can reference from all the different regular season outcomes that we've seen. These are all-star teams. These are compiled referees and linesmen and everything of that sort, where they just bring in what they believe the best of the best, which, by the way, is a whole nother discussion about playoffs and NFL officiating and stuff like that, which I am very much anti pro, all-star officiating teams. I mean, why build up a rapport or have a team in the regular season if it doesn't matter come playoff time, when calls become much more crucial for a lot of different reasons? But regardless, this is not his usual team. there may be
that's not accurate. They changed that a few years back.
Yeah.
First 2 rounds of the playoffs.
So first 2 rounds, it's normal teams and stuff like that, but you have people up above that are still all-star officiating. There are other people in his ear. There are always extra officials in playoff games, regardless, that can overrule, bring in their judgment, stuff of that nature. There is the sky judge and everything, and that is not something that's applied in regular season. But regardless, decision making is different in the playoffs, and I don't want to use any sort of reference. It can be something you can use if you really, truly want to. But at the end of the day, I think decision making and stuff like that by officials just change in the playoffs, where calls are going to come left and right. That's just how it's going to work. Whether you feel snake bitten or not, it should never be. I mean, the Philly call or non-call was egregious and it was pretty crazy. But at the end of the day, was that the reason the Bills lost that game? No. Would it have helped if they got that call? Sure. But sitting here and saying that Hochuli was the reason that it went south is also egregious and dumb, in my opinion. It's like, no. The reason the Bills lost that game is just, unfortunately, a miscommunication in overtime. The game's over if that doesn't happen. A misunderstanding of where Gabe Davis needed to run, and or where Josh Allen wanted him to run, and or where he should have probably thrown that ball, whatever it might be. It's just, you just got to execute. You just got to do what you need to do. All of that stuff. The official conversation to me is just so overblown and kind of things that people want to look into, that it's like in the playoff time, I feel like if people can really make a statistic about officials and whatnot and how much different they, officiate games and playoffs and regular seasons, I would imagine there's trends that just favor letting players play. I would love to believe that to be the case, because it feels like at the end of the day, you like the Puka Nacua no call. I'll just point that one out. That one, 9.5 out of 10, 99 out of 100 times in the regular season, one thing is getting called there, whether it's the hold on his jersey, whether it's the defender going through him to do anything to play the pass, and or the late crack coming over from the safety. One of those things is getting called. At the end of the day, though, it's the playoffs, and they just didn't want to pull out the laundry because it was very much bang, bang, and you want to just let players dictate the game and dictate how the game resolves and where it ends, and I have no problem with that. So I don't like the official conversation. I don't like how people want to bring that up as if that's almost a predetermined reason why the Bills may lose this game. It's a dumb conversation, in my opinion. I'm not saying do whatever makes you happy. That's fine. It's just not something I want to sit here and talk about too much, to be quite frank.
It's living in your fears. And look, Luca and I, and some other folks, like, we've watched sports long enough, so I understand if this is the first time you've thought about it, or maybe this is the first time you've had access to this data. We're just trying to calm your fears of what this is. And I also want to tell you, I like this point here by Bob. Is there any conspiracy theory? Not that I don't believe there's one, that it could be positioned that there's a potential TV ratings boost if Taylor moves on to the AFC Championship game. We're talking about Taylor Swift here, I assume, and not Juwan Taylor. And I'm going with the belief that an intentional skewing like that upon officiating is patently absurd thought. Bob, listen, and I 100% respect where you're coming from. And look, you don't have to go too far out of bounds to get yourself in a headspace where you think to yourself, boy, the NFL loves having Taylor Swift on their screen. Like, I understand where you're coming from. I 100% do. What I will tell you, Bob, is last week, the Dallas Cowboys got eliminated from the playoffs. They have not made it to a Super Bowl since the mid-90s. There is no bigger ratings draw in professional sports in America than the Dallas Cowboys, and it's not even close. It's why national sports shows dedicate segments to the Cowboys on weeks they aren't even playing a game. The Dallas Cowboys are ratings gold. If there was a conspiracy theory to get Taylor Swift to the Super Bowl because of ratings, the Cowboys would have been there once in the last 3 decades. So I get where you're coming from. I 100% do. But I think, kind of like the official conversation, it's one of those things that you'll drive yourself crazy playing what if. But the reality is that there's just not much to it. And if you want a conspiracy theory from the other side, the Grammys come up in the early February. Yes, Luca, I looked this up. This makes me a really cool person. And boy, oh boy, wouldn't the Grammys like Travis Kelce in attendance so they can get their kiss when Taylor Swift I assume wins something. And this is not me being condescending. I'm not a music person, but I'm assuming she's probably going to win something or be up for something because she's a pretty big deal. And, they might want that. So maybe I see your conspiracy theory and I raise you. But Luca, back to the Cowboy point, I think that would probably have to ease the mind. And it's not like the Cowboys have lost all their games by 30 points like they lost last week, where the refs couldn't even get in the way. They've lost some real heartbreakers along the way too. Dez didn't catch it. Tony Romo fumbling a point after attempt. So, I think as fun as it is to talk about, the NFL is a billion-dollar sport. And the reason why the NFL works as well as it does is because fans in Buffalo can have just as much belief in their team as fans in New York, fans in Dallas, fans in Chicago. It's not like baseball where you have to live in one of the biggest markets in the country to feel like your team has a realistic shot. Everybody's on a level playing field. The NFL is not going to risk their reputation for one rating spike on a game that's already going to break ratings records no matter who shows up.